Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. I'm Santiago Kneeland, your host, and today we're going to be talking about what is the Great Pearl. This is one of the parables from Jesus that is least known, but it's a very interesting parable. And I'm going to be diving into this, what is the pearl, how do we find it, what is this parable all about. And I'm going to be joined by Don Clementin. He's a UB reader, and he was born and raised in the Bay Area of Northern California. He worked in the engineering field as a structural draftsman. Then he retired and repurposed in 2020. He now lives in Boston, Massachusetts, and since 1999, where he resides with his wife and supportive Urantia book partner. In 2012, he met the authors behind what would become the Christ Experiment, and he has since become a dedicated partner in that effort. Don continues to actively promote and advance the teachings of the Urantia book. So welcome, Don. Welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here. Good to see you too.
Thank you, Don. So we have this parable, which is not that like the classic parables from Jesus, but I think it's a very interesting parable. Let me read what it says so that we can dive into what it is. And the topic is the pearl of great price, seeking the kingdom of heaven. And the parable states, the kingdom of heaven is also like a merchant seeking godly pearls. And having found one pearl of great price, he went out and sold everything he possessed that he might be able to buy the extraordinary pearl. So what does this tell us? What does this tell you, Don, about the pearl?
Well, one of the things that stands out is Jesus likened the kingdom of heaven to many different things, showing that the kingdom has a number of different facets to it, and that the kingdom of heaven would affect us in various ways. Now, this merchant found a pearl that was of very great value, and it tells us he sold everything he had to buy the pearl. So that's an indication that with an individual, facets of the kingdom of the heavens has the greatest value that one could place any type of value upon. And the fact that he sold everything that he had to get the pearl shows the priority that he placed upon the kingdom of heaven. So I think a good place for us to start would then be, what does the pearl represent? I mean, for you and I, we know this isn't a literal uh, pearl that we would go out to acquire and sell our home or our valuables to attain. So really then, I think a good place to start is, what does that pearl represent to an individual who wants to place the kingdom as the first place in their life? What would that represent? What would you say that would represent?
That's an interesting question because, like you're saying, it's not that it's literally a pearl. I think that the pearl signifies that that object that is of so much value to us that it can be anything, and that's what I think is interesting, is that it can be one object, and I don't want to say the word object because it doesn't have to be necessarily an object. It can be something else, like the kingdom. It's a concept. So how do we define it? And I think that's a beauty in this parable, that when you use the pearl as the archetype, as a symbol, it symbolizes something that is really something that you give a lot of value to. And it's interesting because I think pearls are one of those objects that it depends on you give the value to. I mean, pearls are something that they're found, just looking at what is a pearl. It's something that you find inside a clam, inside of a something in the sea. But it's the value that we give it and that we place and that we make jewelry that creates that object, that thing that was inside the gut of a clam into a piece of of art, of jewelry, of something of great value. So I think that's the key of identifying what that pearl is to us. I think that's the key. And my question to you is, what do you think is a pearl? Do you agree with me, or what would be that pearl in your case to
Yeah,
you?
so I think we could look at a lot of things that Jesus said throughout his ministry to gain light upon what he meant by purchasing this pearl, which is of great value. He once spoke about a man who discovered a treasure in a field. And he went off and bought the whole field. So, what does that represent? I think it represents what you treasure most in life is where you will give all of your energy and attention. What do you place as the highest, the things of the highest value in life? So to me, Jesus always placed the greatest value on spiritual things. He always put material things in their proper place by indicating that one should not use all of their energies in acquiring material possessions. He also spoke about the love of the Father having a transcendent place in one's heart. Someone once asked him, what's the greatest command? He says, love the Father with your whole heart, soul, and mind. Then love your neighbor as yourself. So he always placed relationships with others, service to others, love for God, and developing qualities of ethics and morality, which are all qualities of a spiritual nature. And I think that when a person goes off and sells everything they have to get this pearl of great value, that means now your life is aligned vertically so that all of your consciousness and all of your time is always circumscribed with how can I be a better person, a spiritual person, of value not only to myself but to the world around me.
Hmm.
And when that becomes your goal, because when I think about selling everything one has to buy the pearl, we know that we have to live in this world. We still have to work. We can't give up a job. Some people do become, I guess, full-time ministers, or some people go to monasteries or whatever. But Jesus never lived a life of isolation. He was always engaged. He
Hmm.
even worked for a long time as a carpenter, and we know that during the time where he preached, he also took time out to go fishing to bring in income, in addition to the contributions that people gave him. So I don't think that he meant that we just divorce ourselves from a life of reality. We do have to live in this world and support ourselves. But everything he did in his comings and goings, he said, my food was for me to do the will of my Father who sent me. And so when our life is aligned like that, everything we do, our work, our interactions with people, and even our future, we don't, for me, the kingdom of the heavens represents this life and then our hope for the life that will come beyond this when we finish our earthly course. So
Hmm.
when we're aligned like that, uh, it's not that we have to have everything that we can grab a hold of now in this life and forget about our future life. We're building treasure so that we can wake up on a uh, in the true heavens once we finish our life here. So I think it has an impact upon how we live our life here, being spiritually conscious, uh, divinely focused, and having that real understanding that we have an inheritance that goes beyond this life as well.
That's interesting. I mean, you brought a lot of points And I think one of them is what you were saying from Jesus, that he wasn't this monk that was isolated, trying to become enlightened, but he engaged people. He worked with people. And one of the things I like really much is give to God what's God and give to Caesar what's Caesar's. I think that's what you were saying about the material world. I mean, recognizing it and giving the space that it needs. Not overdoing it. Not working for the material. I think the material has to work for the spiritual and not the other way around. I think that's some of the things that really in our world, our times, it's the other way around. But we lose our spirituality in order to gain the material. Yeah, because we live in a secular world. But I think this is very important that Jesus did not renounce the material. I think he understood it. He, in his ministry and everything, there was a whole system where they gathered the funds and they, the resources, the food, everything you can find it and it's there. So I think it's very important that we realize that it's not divorcing ourselves from wealth or from this richness or from the material, but it's really finding that value. And I think that's the important. I mean, Jesus took out the value or really disengage the value in the and only the material. And so we use this, or we have this metaphor of this pearl symbolizing that thing of value. But you can give it anything, anything. So it can be an idea, it can be a concept. It's not necessarily something physical and really a treasure. So I really like this, that it gives us the our own interpretation or our own way or our own license to give or to find that value, that thing of value. And in your case, Don, what would be that of greatest value? And I know, I mean, we can all agree on certain things, but what is it for Don? What is it that of greatest value? That pearl.
Yeah, no, so that's a good question because I was thinking, um, what would be the evidence that I have sold everything and bought this pearl of great price? And I don't, it's not one thing, but along with asking that question is something else. Could I have sold everything and bought the pearl, and then at some point the pearl starts to lose its luster? So
Okay.
for me, it is this. There's certain things that I do that keep me aligned, and I feel it. One is regular prayer. One is taking time to meditate. The other aspect is being of service, like doing this podcast, where others can benefit from a discussion, doing outreach ministry, where I'm actively looking for opportunities to share Jesus' message with others, interacting with others, being conscious every time I walk outside of my apartment, I'm going to the store or somewhere else, being conscious to be kind to people. Don't be on edge. I'm living in a city where people are on edge. They honk horns. The least little thing can tick someone off and they could be ready to have a confrontation. And so you're in this environment all the time, and you could easily be pulled into a fight or flight thinking. So take a breath, calm yourself down, go out recognizing, I'm a representative for the master. What can I do as I'm out engaging among people to bring joy to people, to smile and give a smile. If I see someone who I can help, how can I help them? Now, there's sometimes when I'm not feeling quite right. I feel I'm feeling out of sync. And when I do that, I recognize maybe I have not been praying as
Hmm.
much as I should have been as I should be, staying in communication with the Father and with Christ. Am I neglecting meditation? And then I'm married, so I also have to look after the spiritual welfare of my spouse. Am I engaging in spiritual conversations with her, seeing how she's doing? And sometimes if I get engaged in just a hobby or something for some length of time, I can feel myself not centered. And when that non-centering comes, it's like, okay, you're taking the pearl and you're not allowing it to allow its value to shine, and I have to get realigned. So I don't think that we reach a state where we buy the pearl because Jesus, or one of the writers once spoke about not forgetting the love you had at first. And I can remember some points in life where, especially when I got enlightened about spiritual and religious things, I was like on fire. And I was like, oh boy, I've got to share this with everyone. And we don't always stay on that high, but we don't want to ever lose that love and enthusiasm for truth, for beauty, for goodness, and for spiritual things. So those are some of the things that I use as a gauge for myself. And I think with everyone, it's going to be different. But it does call for vigilance, and it calls for monitoring your spiritual welfare and constantly taking the temperature on where you're at. One other thing I'll mention is that because the world right now seems to be dealing with a lot of perplexing problems, being occupied with the news too much can cause you anxiety. And
Totally.
it can cause you to begin to think that our planet's condition lies in the hands of mortal men, as if there is no spiritual direction. And once your mentality shifts
Yeah.
to that, you'll begin feeling the anxiety that everyone else has. You'll begin to lose your peace. So, maintaining that pearl of great value will keep you centered so that, as one passage said, if all things should crash, what does that matter to the kingdom believer who has eternal life within his focus? So, I think those are a few things from my personal standpoint that I have to navigate, negotiate to make sure I've keeping that pearl of high value in sight.
I, I really like this that what you're saying of maintaining the pearl of great value, and it's a constant thing. You know, it's not that you attain it and now I mission accomplished and I'm done and that's something that we see within the hero's journey. You know that it's not a you get from point A to point B, but you it's step by step and it builds and I see this in what you're saying. It's maintaining the pearl. It's not also maintaining, but it's enhancing. I think it's you know, because in a way, like you're saying, it's the secular world and the day to day, unfortunately, like you're saying, is makes you believe that we're under the control of men. You know that it's this is a man-made world, and that the men's laws are universal and absolute, and they're really not. You know, and you get into that rut, and you have to because it's like. And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. It's like when technology comes, that even if you don't want it, the internet, it's here, you know, and now everything is in the end. You can't go to the bank or do anything without that. I think the material in the secular world with that happens, you know, even though you try to be a spiritual person, this materialism gets you into a rut and you know everything. And that's why what you're saying is very important on maintaining the pearl of great value, and it's catching yourself, gauging yourself, because you know we hopefully or I mean it's a great wish that every day we would be in a great mood, you know, and we would be in a balance, but that doesn't happen. I mean, there's outside forces, there are inside forces, and I think that's as we become more conscious of that and we understand it, you know, I always say that when it's dinner time or a lunchtime and I'm not fed, I'm starting to get cranky, and everybody knows it, and I know it. You know, and I tell people it's not personal. I'm just in a bad mood. I need something in my belly, you know. But I can understand it, and even if I try to be good, you know, you're waiting there. You're not trying to have a bad mood. You have a bad mood. So, but you know, you understand it. So I think recognizing that is the first step, and then trying to fix it is the other, or maintaining it, like you're saying, is very important. So thank you for this these comments. And what does it mean to sell everything? You know, we define that there's this pearl that we give the value. You know, what is the pearl? But what is the other part that it says? It's he went out and sold everything he possessed that he might be able to buy the extraordinary pearl. What does that mean to you, Don?
When you sell everything, this again, it's your priority. Let's just take a look at some examples Jesus gave during his life. He once says that there was a man who had a storehouse, and he started accumulating his wealth. And as his wealth got bigger, he says he tore down his old storehouses to build bigger ones so
Mm-hmm.
that he could put more and more stuff in. And Jesus in the parable, he says, "You foolish man, don't you know that you're going to die tonight?"
Yeah,
You
exactly.
see?
Yeah.
And so, if you're working, okay, how far do you allow making income and building wealth intrude into your life? If you have bought the pearl of great value, your work will not intrude so much into your life that you neglect your family, your children, your social obligations. You're so tired that you have no time for service to others because it's the constant grab for that. When you have sold the pearl, or when you have bought the pearl of great price, you put limits on how much this temporal world can demand on you. There's always limits to everything outside of kingdom interests and spiritual interests that you will allow to intrude. You set the boundary, say, okay, this far you may come and no further. And you don't fear, there's sometimes a fear, I'll never have enough, I'll never have enough. And so we lose that trust that the Father said that our real needs will be supplied. When you have brought the pearl, um, you don't compromise your ethics because uh, something presents itself that is slightly dishonest, but it may give you a great advantage over others. So you have your morality and your ethics in place. You don't allow wrongful things or bad things or corrupt things or dishonesty or lying to intrude upon this code of ethics and morality that you've built up. You see, it doesn't mean that you don't use sagacity and whatever kinds of cleverness that you
Hmm.
need to negotiate in the world.
Yeah.
uh, you know, you're not like a sacrificial lamb that goes out there and says, "Hey,
Yeah.
chop my head off."
Yeah, yeah. You're negotiating. Yeah, yeah, and it's not, you're not abusing, and you're not being abused. It's
Exactly,
negotiating. It's a win-win, a benefit for all. You know.
exactly. So, though I would say that's it. You set the boundaries over what you will allow this life, uh, this temporal life we have, to intrude upon those things that you know are of the highest value. And by doing that, you will keep that pearl. You won't allow it to be diminished or stuck in a drawer or in a closet while you go off and do other things. And
Fed to the pigs, you know, fed to the swine. And I like that. Have you heard that? Don't feed pearls or to swine, you know, or
yeah,
diamonds to. Yeah, that's it. I like what you're saying. Is that we're setting boundaries. You're negotiating, and I think it's very important. And one of the things that we've been, you know, honing in these sessions that we had of the Divine Within and different guests is our dignity, that has come out, and that's something that we kind of lose in the material world, and we when we get into this rut, working and everything, we lose dignity towards ourselves, and people start to do the to yeah lose dignity for us, and that's something very important that I think Jesus really, he dignified everybody, even the lepers, even people that were, the outsiders, or the unwanted, but he really loved them, and it was truthful. It wasn't just something that he said, it's something that he did. So I think that's very important, because he always set this boundary, and it was a very big boundary. He was led to his sacrifice, but he did it in a so righteous and so glorified way that you can't but admire that, even in that state. Anybody would be in that state where you're going to be put to death in that horrible way. You would break. But I think this is what you're just saying, even in that state of anguish and death, and what he lived, he knew his boundaries, and he knew that nobody would be able to touch his spirit, to touch his soul. I mean, that was even if he was going to be dead materially. He wasn't. Nobody was going to. It's like the citadel of the spirit. That concept I really like. He knew of the citadel of the spirit, and that's where he sought refuge, and that's why he was this situation of the crucifixion is so, in many ways, not only in the resurrection. I think that his process of death is so mighty in his death, that even was a lesson to all.
And the matter of fact, since you mentioned that, his death was and the way he died was evidence that he truly had bought the pearl himself.
Exactly, exactly, exactly.
And you mentioned something else about personal dignity. So a lot of our discussion has revolved around how evident is it that we have brought the pearl from looking at it from the outside. We talked about work and how we interact with people, but another evidence is how are we transforming ourselves as an individual internally? You know, am I, what kind of a person am I? And like, for instance, in your comments, you've mentioned many of the beautiful things that were reflected in Jesus. We have the capacity to reflect those same things. And even without people knowing our external circumstances, like where do I work? Where do I live? What kind of work do I do? People can often tell how we are when they just encounter us. A stranger can encounter us,
Hmm.
and in a few moments of interaction, can make a determination of what kind of a character you are. Do you draw them? So when we are spiritually aligned, when we've sold everything, how about us selling all of those negative traits that we have to buy the pearl of great value? Can I sell prejudice? Can I get rid of uh, uh, being temperamental, being angry, uh, having hostility towards others? Um, can I get rid of those things and buy things like humility, compassion, a loving nature? Can I sell off all of these negative things, get rid of them, and buy those beautiful things that are the fruits of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, long suffering, kindness, goodness, faith, mildness, self control. Those are all fruits of the Spirit, which, if we're buying the pearl of great value, those are internal things that would be an evidence that we have bought the pearl of great price, and it will
That
be
that I
evident.
think constitutes the pearl. That is the matter that makes the pearl. The
Yeah.
in my view, those elements, the fruits that you mentioned, are part of that pearl. Maybe not the entirety, but what the consequence of when you and I love this what you said, as you sell out the negative and buy beautiful fruits of the spirit. I think that's very
Mhm.
interesting, because we all You know, it's when you go to the pawn shop, or not the pawn shop, but you go to a flea market and you take, or garage sale, whatnot. You're taking something that you don't need anymore, you know, or something that maybe it is of value. You know, it doesn't mean that you're doing without things that are not valuable. Maybe there is something, you know, very valuable. Let me put this example. Maybe you're selling off a very valuable sword, and what does the sword do? Maybe it cuts you know, it's something. It's an instrument of harm. So instead of maybe having that sword that protects you, that is you know, powerful, that it's even have money, you know, it's valuable. You're doing it without, because you're looking for the protection of God. You know, in that sense, you don't need a sword anymore. You have that faith, and you're doing without that sword, and you're changing it for compassion. You're changing it for love. All these fruits that you mentioned. So I really like that you're selling off, and I don't want to say the negative, or maybe we can reframe it and say what you don't need, what is not of transcendental value. Let's put it that way, right?
Yeah. I think of them as the negative things because I think we have to come to realize oftentimes we live in a world where people say, oh, it's not your fault. Oh, you're okay. Oh, you're such a sweetheart. Oh, never mind this. And what that does is it can give a license to mediocrity. And we do not want to buy into mediocrity. We have too much going for us. We have the Father's Spirit with us. We have the Spirit of truth around us. We have the beautiful example of Jesus Christ. We have been given the knowledge that we have free will, that we can mold towards our own. We have the ability to craft and design our own life with the power of free will and with the Spirit of God that He's given us. And so we should, I think this is another thing, allowing no place for mediocrity in our life. Be the
This is a
best.
very interesting. This is very interesting. Yeah,
Yes.
this is what I say of carpe diem. You know, my phrase of carpe diem is seize the day, and it doesn't mean that every day you're just gonna, you know, fall of tiredness, you know, because you exhausted yourself. Maybe this, you know, the Sabbath, there's a day for rest, but make it a day of rest. Really experience it. So I think this is very important. What you're saying, do not allow for mediocrity. And unfortunately, the world right now kind of fosters that mediocrity, that, you know, that. And I think that, you know, we have that potential. And, this is a great moment to tell the story that I had a personal experience when I was a kid, when I was 12. Well, 10 to 12. I went to a camp in Texas, Camp Stewart. If anybody from Camp Stewart is listening, uh, GTS, which has gone to Stewart. But it was a very, very, I liked it because being a Mexican, I was, you know, suddenly thrown into a very American lifestyle, you know, with American kids and American values. There was a very interesting thing that they did. I mean, there was the Uncle Bill's team, and this is a camp that's been probably over 100 years open, you know, and it's got a lot of history. And you know, Uncle Bill, who founded, I mean, he was one of the owners of the camp. He had this philosophy, because he had an experience where I mean, I don't want to make it too long. The point is that he reached in a philosophy, concluded in a philosophy that stated, God first, other second, I am third. And it was a very powerful, you know, to be in Uncle Bill's team, you had to be voted in, and then you had to, you know, advance in the advancement trail where you had to earn certain ranks and whatnot. I didn't. I was mediocre because I already had the votes from all my friends. You know, I was very, very liked. You know, I was very charismatic and, you know, a very good friend, and I had the vote. That wasn't an issue. Everybody was going to vote for me. You know, and I was going to go in, but I didn't advance it that much. And they even did a special day. You know, that if so, people that were almost there that could advance, and they would show that their effort, they would be awarded and they would be invited into the Uncle Bill's team. So I was very arrogant and saying, you know, I got the votes. I don't need to do this. This isn't for me. So instead of, you know, maybe I wouldn't have gotten the rank, but I didn't put in the effort. And everybody saw that I didn't put in the effort. So when the ceremony came in, it was a very, you know, big ceremony and whatnot. When I did the ceremony, and you know, they read the names, they didn't read mine, and I was devastated, and everybody was like, "What the hell? What happened, Santiago? You didn't get it." And I was mad, and I was mad at the organizers, and I was mad at George, if you hear as George, and thank you for the lesson, because I was mad, and I even was writing, and I was just pissed off, and I was being a kid, and he sat me down. He said, "You know what? You did get the votes, but you didn't put the effort. You were mediocre in that. You didn't seize the day. You didn't do that, so you're not going to get it." And maybe if and this was, I'm talking about the 90s. So in the 90s we were kind of tougher then, it was more of a tough love then. And that really at the moment really pissed me off, and I didn't like it, but that has gotten, and that's part of my life. And every day I go, that I do something, I remember and say, seize the day. You have to make whatever is in your hands. You always have to do what's in there, and that is very important, that we do not leave space for mediocrity. We can't. If God values us so much, why do we value us so not ourselves so little?
Yeah.
So please, just I wanted to share that story,
Sure.
and
Good.
if
Yeah.
maybe I want to
And I
comment.
think we've all hit periods like that where we know we haven't done our best, and life is such that there are ups and downs, but we should always be striving for the best person we could possibly be. Because think about that parable of selling everything. I mean, what sense would it make for him to sell all of his valuables, get the pearl, and just stick it in the garage? If you've got something very valuable, you're going to show it, display it, and share it, and allow others to uh, somehow have some
Yeah, you're
taste of
gonna share it.
it,
Yeah, I think that's what makes us unique. Our willingness to share. And you were saying that when you became enlightened and you started to find God, well, you wanted to just go out in the world and tell everybody the good news. But and that is part of our nature. When you want to share, and you found this part, but I think it's we always have to share our pearls with people that are willing and that know that value. And then this is very important, and I mentioned it a little bit. It's throwing pearls and diamonds to swine. That is a very interesting metaphor, because they do not value that. They're gonna just trample over it, and they're not gonna see that value. So I mean, I think that's another important issue about this. I mean, there's people that do not want to see that pearl, or do not want to find the value in that pearl. What happens when you encounter those people? I mean, and this is something interesting, you try to make people, or try to invite people into not converting or anything. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, being a good human being, being compassionate. And sometimes it's hard to break or open up. What's your take on this? How can you love or share this pearl with people that are in that state?
well, you can only share with those who wish to partake in your joy. And so there's two ways to look at this. One is recognizing that there are going to be an appreciable number of people who don't see the value in the pearl right now. And that's what I always keep in mind, right now.
Right now.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe later on they might, but that doesn't make them my enemy. See? And so I won't, when Jesus, I think what he mentioned about throwing pearls before swine is sharing the good news of the kingdom with someone who is not ready. There are many people who are just so material minded and lack such spirituality that if you were to share spiritual things with them, they cut you down with sarcasm or tell you you're stupid and ignorant. And so for those people, you should not uh, you should not try to convert or share them. They're using their free will in a certain way, and so you leave them in peace. But there are so many people who are ready for a spiritual encounter if we have the wisdom on how to do an interchange with them. And since I spent so many years in ministry in my prior religious association of trying to convert people, I know that that has very little beneficial outcome to it. But if you can just share something good with a person, uh, just I always like Jesus' method of just being your friend first, you know. Um, and sharing spiritual things doesn't always necessarily mean opening a book and reading passages about things, you
Maybe
know.
it's the least thing that you have to do, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. So I just, we learn that Jesus went about doing good, and he traveled among people of different backgrounds, and he always found something positive to say. And it's so easy when we get with someone to dwell on negative things that are going on, and just talking about negative energy. But why not just why not just pursue uh, something positive and interesting and beneficial? Hi, James. Welcome.
Hey, James, welcome. No, you're here. So we just started, and I mean, we've been talking, but you're coming in good. So I want to welcome James, who is just joining us. James Woodward, a musician and carpenter with a deep spiritual quest, discovered the Urantia book in 1973 and became an active student and promoter of its teachings. Throughout his life, he has participated in study groups, organized conferences, and held leadership roles within the Urantia community, including positions at the Urantia Foundation and Urantia Association. In addition to his spiritual work, James also has developed his musical career, releasing albums of the original songs with spiritual themes under the artistic name J. Woody. So thanks for being here, James. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you again, Santiago, and thanks to Gabriel and the whole team at the Center for Unity. You're doing a really good work. I appreciate it.
I mean, we mentioned the parable, which you know. So my question to you is, what does the pearl represent? What is the pearl?
Ah, well, there we are. That's the heart of the whole thing, isn't it? Well, the pearl is a symbol.
Yes.
A parable is an allegory that uses abstract uh, abstract objects to talk about concrete things. And in this case, the pearl, it just represents something that this merchant is willing to go out and sell everything so that he can purchase this pearl of great price. So it is an analogy. It's sort of a parable, but it goes along with all these. We first have to talk about the kingdom of heaven, because that's the prelude to this. Is that all of these parables have to do with the kingdom of heaven. So when we're unpacking these parables, we have to default back to what we know about the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah, I mean, what we were talking about, James, is that what does this pearl represent? And we were saying that the pearl is something that has value. It's a treasure, but it also, in culture and everything, we give that. What is that value? What is that pearl? And like you were saying, it's the kingdom. And Don and I were saying that, what do you place of the highest value? What is that pearl? It's and what I like about this is that a pearl can represent different things to anybody, but it is something that is of great value to that person. So each one has different perceptions of what is valuable in that sense. So in your opinion, from what you're saying, is that the pearl represents the kingdom, and what else could it represent? Or in your case, what is that of value?
I think we first need to ask ourselves, what is our emotional program for happiness? Because what we're talking about is joy and happiness, and most of us are governed by our unconscious programs for happiness, which are all tied into the secular world, the materialistic things that we think about when we're talking about stuff that has great value. But this teaching, it invites us to transcend all of those secular material things and go for the things that are of eternal value, and which is spiritual joy. And that's what we get when we step into the kingdom through faith. That's a really important aspect of it, is that we receive the joy and the happiness.
And one of the things that we were mentioning is that and we kind of sell off the negative, or not the negative, the things that are not of value, you know, throughout life. I mean, we accumulate stuff, and we probably accumulate material stuff, but when we find this value, when we find this pearl, when we find this treasure, it's when we take everything that we have, all of our material possessions, and one of the things that we're saying, the negative, or I don't want, like I said, I don't want to say the negative, but what doesn't add value to us, we give that. And that's what we believe in. And what I believe is that he sold everything he possessed in order to get this value. You know, you get rid of everything that is not of value to you to get to this. So what's your take on this, of, you know, getting rid of everything, of selling everything? What is that to you?
Well, it's you're diving right into the heart of this. Like all parables, the pearl of great price, it's a story about choices. It's a story about choices, and when the pearl is discovered and its value is realized, the backstory is revealed without even really mentioning the backstory, because the backstory is that something was missing. When you framed it in a sense of a negative, it's not necessarily a negative, but it is something missing. Otherwise, this merchant wouldn't have been so jazzed, you know, to find this pearl of great price and to go out. So something was missing in his life, and he made a choice. Like all parables, you go through them. The prodigal son, one of the most famous parables. It's about the son making choices and going off into destitution, and the father making choices to receive him back, and the other son making choices to have resentment. The parables are always pointing us to choices and decisions. So that's what I would say in regard to that, is look for the choices, and also, because it's an allegory, you have to look a little deeper. There's something always floating around just beneath the surface in an allegory.
And in that case, what do you think is the allegory in this case?
Well, the allegory it's talking about making choices between material things and spiritual things. We know that material things, they're material and they are finite, and we know that spiritual things are infinite and eternal. So that's what the allegory is talking about. And back to this happiness. We talk about our programs for happiness, but it's in the Rancher book, it talks mostly about joy, about the joy that when we find this key into the eternal, that we're filled with joy, and it's the spiritual joy. That's the pearl of great price, or the coin that was lost and was found, or the leaven that was put into the loaves, the seed that fell on rich soil.
What you're saying is and I like this, and we also commented, Don and I were commenting on the you know, the material and the secular world that we live in, and that you know, we have to, and you were stating it, we have to sacrifice or do without these material things, or even not the without, because as we were saying, you know, Jesus always gave the you know, what's that to God and what's that to Caesar, you know, and that is something that we have to also consider, that we're not divorcing from materialism and from the material reality, but that we're working with it. And Don was saying that we have to be very smart in how we engage and how we conduct ourselves. But we always have to keep this this value, this pearl within us, so that we don't lose those fruits of the spirit. We have to keep this value, and it's the treasure that we find, and that something that we also said is that you just don't find it and put it away. You find it and you treasure it. You really embellish it and you bring it out.
One of the things when I look at the parable, the merchant, he sold something so that he could buy something. And the stuff that he sold had lesser value than the stuff that he bought, which was the pearl. And in this, Jesus clearly calls it the kingdom of heaven. So the kingdom of heaven, as you mentioned, James, was spoken of in various different ways throughout Jesus' ministry and in other parables. But they always had to do, the kingdom of heaven had to do with an alignment of spiritual values, our values with those of heaven. And they involve certain spiritual realities which are reflected in our behaviors and in our choices of life. Earlier, when Santiago and I were talking, and you touched upon this, James, not allowing the material to transcend our spiritual ambitions. So the person who has bought the pearl sets boundaries as to what they will, from this temporal life, to intrude upon their spiritual life. Once we value that kingdom of the heavens and all of its spiritual implications, then we don't chase every dollar and ruin our health in doing it. We don't sacrifice family relationships. We don't forfeit social service. We don't compromise who we are as an individual, compromise our ethics and our duties, and rationalize them away when a shorter path to accomplishing something may involve things that are dishonest or underhanded. And when we look at Jesus' life, he was truly aligned. He wasn't an ascetic or lived in a monastery. He worked with his hands, he engaged with people, and yet he could say throughout all of his travels, my food is to do the will of my Father who sent me. And while saying that, he led a very practical life of service. Santiago had mentioned that at the end of his life, he, endured an excruciating death on the cross, which was really a reflection that not only did he give the parable, but he himself bought the pearl of great value too, and sacrificed everything, including his mortal life, to attain all that was going to be extended to him through his faithfulness to divine choices.
Yeah. I like that way that you frame it. Can you share, James, on that?
Oh yeah, that last phrase that you used on faithful. You have to go back. This parable appears further along in the Urantia book. The first place that it appears is in the paper 140, the ordination, when he's speaking to the apostles, and it goes like this: the right to enter the kingdom is conditioned by faith, personal belief. The cost of remaining in the progressive ascent of the kingdom is the pearl of great price, in order to possess which a man sells all that he has. So he mentioned this, he spells this out to the apostles right after the ordination. And then it's a couple hundred pages later when it pops up as a parable when he's speaking from the boat to the multitude that are back on the shore. But that's what the important thing, that the right to enter the kingdom is conditioned by faith. So that's the key, and it's free. Everything of spiritual value is free. but we have to make that choice. Again, it's decisions, and more decisions. It also tells us the kingdom of heaven is neither a social nor economic order. It is an exclusively spiritual brotherhood of God-knowing individuals. There's all kinds of information. There's a whole paper on the kingdom of heaven, but here's one that I like because it's the divine within. It says, does guide us, and in the adjustment of thought operates to put a preference upon the altruistic impulse as leading to the goal of human happiness and to the joys of the kingdom of heaven. So that I think ties in very well with what Don was talking about.
Well, I'm glad that James mentioned the two areas where the pearl was mentioned, because we had a little discussion with this before you came, James. I like where you cited that Jesus mentioned that the right to enter the kingdom is conditioned by faith. So, in a sense, that's like, okay, maybe you've got the pearl, but it's not like you get the pearl. You can acquire the pearl and then allow it to lose its luster, so to speak. And that second passage there, where it says that we have to be progressive. It's not like, okay, I got the pearl, I'm all set, I'm going to just kick back and do nothing. We have to continue to progress, and this is one of the things we were talking about, is constantly taking a check and see where we are, because the challenges of living in this world can sometimes start to intrude where, as we were mentioning before, maybe we're not praying as much as we used to, keeping that divine connection, or taking time to meditate. Maybe we're neglecting people that need our attention and we need to care for. So it's not like we buy the pearl and that's it. It's a constant navigating and negotiating life to keep that pearl, hang on to it, and not let it get away from us.
Yeah, totally. It's a constant. It's not that you reach the end or you reach the goal. It's that you're constantly reinventing and not reinventing, but you're constantly reaffirming. Sorry, the value of the pearl. And it's very interesting because we've seen a lot of times, and when great people and people of knowledge, wizards, and get really enlightened, if they misuse that power, if they turn that pearl into something of their own advantage, they lose that agency, they lose that that magic. And it's something that we all have to do. It's something, when you find that pearl, you have to always give that pearl, share that pearl, but not abuse that pearl.
Well, I think we're circling around in a really cool way here in this discussion about the import and the meaning of this parable. I would quote something else here from Jesus, where he says, "I come proclaiming faith, the gift of God, as the price of entrance into the kingdom of heaven." So again, it all circles back to faith. And like Don was saying, you enter the kingdom by grace. We're told that's free. But in order to stay in the kingdom, you do have to bring forth the fruits of the Spirit. You have to maintain that flame of faith. You have to keep it burning, like Don was saying. And there's a lot of ways to keep it burning, but serving our brothers and sisters is probably the best way. But anyway,
Exactly.
it's again, that's this faith and joy. It also says we go on in the joy and liberty of the kingdom of heaven. So over and over we find this. We find the joy coming back as the key understanding to the meaning of what's in the kingdom of heaven, and it's easy to overlook, especially with evolutionary religion. Everything gets all solemn and it gets sort of buried in ritual, sometimes doctrine. We understand that, but it has to
Yeah.
be revisualized, and it also has to be prioritized. What we call happiness is more often referred to as joy, which is it's a step above happiness. Happiness we can have, when you get a present, or you're having a nice day. But spiritual joy is something on a whole other level. It's transcendent, and we get there with our faith, and we have to stay there through
Definitely.
communion. The divine within. The divine within is always bringing us back to remember that faith is the key to the entrance of the kingdom of heaven. That's why we've got our buddy within, always guiding us.
Exactly, and that's the purpose. Yeah, and that's the whole point of this podcast is that there's this divine within, this spark. And I mean, we're talking about the pearl, and this is just a component. You're finding the piece of the pearl and finding that treasure. And how do you find it? You find it by using your divine within, by finding that which has the value, which has whatever that you're willing to give, everything in the world that you have, all the material, like Don was saying, everything that you possess, you're willing to do without to get to that. And what really gives you and tells you what is the value is the divine within. And we were also talking that there's no point in feeding pearls to the swine, and it's always something that you have to keep in mind, that the pearls, it depends on who it is that sees the value in them.
Well, we were talking earlier about Santiago was talking about giving pearls to swine, and I think that kind of moves into a different parable of Jesus. Here, I think he was talking about sharing our spiritual treasures with someone that doesn't have the capacity to appreciate spiritual things. And when we do that, they can become mean or respond to us violently, negatively, condescendingly in some way. So the pearls of the kingdom, if we've bought the kingdom, if I were going to try to make some way to tie the two ideas together, it's that we would share our joy of having possessed that pearl with people that have the capacity to appreciate it. And those that don't have the capacity yet, because we never know what may happen with a person down the line, we just try to maintain peaceful relationships with them. I remember the occasion where Jesus was traveling and he was asked why he didn't go out of his way to share spiritual truths with this particular individual. And he responded that the person wasn't ready for spiritual things yet. You can't force them upon someone who's not ready for them. But Jesus didn't antagonize the man. He didn't belittle him. He was just kind to him and bid him a good day. So that, not casting your pearls before swine doesn't mean you go up, well, you're a swine, I'm not casting my pearls before you, because that would be totally the opposite of something Jesus would do. But internally, you should know, we learn how to navigate our negotiations with people.
Excellent point.
Perfect.
So what's the best way to open that channel of receptivity in somebody who's maybe doesn't have that that burning spark or that motive? Well, the way the master did it was to tell everybody that they're a child of God, a beloved child of God, and that's a game changer, because so many of us go around, programmed that we're not worthy, that we don't deserve spiritual joy.
Yeah, exactly.
Or happiness. But the gospel says, no, you are entitled to it, and it comes for free by grace, because you are a child of God. We are all children of God. Of course, that's the the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man equation that you can always tell people, well, if God is father of all of us, that makes us all brothers and sisters. That what that helps is it says that Jesus was in his ministry, he was trying to give people a superb self-respect, and I really like that phrase when he. You can look it up. I'm paraphrasing, but the superb self-respect is what when you believe you have value, when you believe you have worth, that that it opens up a certain channel of receptivity where you can start to accept that the spiritual joy is your birthright by faith. That's again, you got to have the faith. That's the magic. Well, it's not really magic, but it tells us that faith unlocks the
crucial component.
Well, it unlocks the superhuman aspects of the divine within. It's almost like an equation. If you have faith, then it does unlock. It makes that connection between you and the divine within, your indwelling spirit. Makes it a better connection.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty good, guys. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to close now, but I really want you guys to keep. I mean, let's keep on doing this. Let's have another panel. Let's bring more parables. I mean, let's delve into this because I think we brought a lot of great insights. So, I mean, we're just putting a pause to this conversation. We're gonna be continuing this and expanding into other topics. So. I want to thank you guys for participating. I think it was there was a lot of things that we learned from this, of the value of a pearl, how you give value to that, the importance that it is to maintain that pearl, that it's not something that you attain and it just leave it there. It's something that you cultivate, and what you're willing to give, what you're willing. I don't want to say sacrifice because it's not a sacrifice. Once you realize the value of the pearl, you're willing to leave everything behind because that the value of this pearl just diminishes that value of other things that weren't really worth. Spiritual or eternal. So I think this is a very, very interesting parable. I mean, we've been sharing this. We'll continue this discussion. So thanks, James, for participating. Thank you, Don, for this time. It was a great pleasure to have you here, and we'll be diving into more information. And thank you, if you're out there and you like this, thank you for watching us. If, like I always say, don't share if you don't like it. Just do it if you do. Just like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends that you found these guys that were talking about interesting stuff. It's always good to share. And for this moment, we've come to an end. This is Santiago Kneeland. This is the Divine Within. Take care, carpe diem, and seize the day. So I want to welcome James, who is just joining us. James Woodward, a musician and carpenter with a deep spiritual quest, discovered the Urantia book in 1973 and became an active student and promoter of its teachings. Throughout his life, he has participated in study groups, organized conferences, and held leadership roles within the Urantia community, including positions at the Urantia Foundation and Urantia Association. In addition to his spiritual work, James also has developed his musical career, releasing albums of the original songs with spiritual themes under the artistic name J. Woody. So thanks for being here, James. It's a pleasure to have you.